Welcome back to Beyond the Headline, everyone. It's an exciting and very beneficial day to be with us on the show because I'm here with the founder and CEO of Big Fish Presentations, Kenny Nguyen. Kenny, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Jenna. I'm so happy to be here.
Let's start out with just the simplest question. How have the last 5 years come into your latest book, The Big Fish Experience?
Oh man, that book right there was a big dream of ours because 5 years ago, when we started this company, we always tried to find that book that could inspire us, that we could read and say, this is the definitive way in a process that you can write presentations. But we wanted to find a book that was written in a very human way, that wasn't written in a way where when you give a speech, it just sounds like it's scary. Because public speaking is a very scary thing. Fear is one of the most primitive human emotions that you can have. And I thought to myself, if I could find this book that made presentations sound not so scary, but teach me how to turn presentations into experiences, man, I could really grow my business. But unfortunately, Jenna, we couldn't find that book. And so we thought to ourselves, one day we'll go and write it. And so fast forward 5 years later, we had an opportunity in about year 3 of our business to write a book, capture our lightning in a bottle. And McGraw-Hill told us, we want that book out there, that Presentation 101 book. And we thought, it's time to write the book that we always wanted to read ourselves to help us become better presenters, to help us really figure out that presentations don't need to be so scary. Everyone has, you, me, Jenna, we have the power to present. Everyone has a voice, and we can be the best version of ourselves. So that 5-year culmination in your hand right now is one of our biggest dreams.
Well, you certainly did a great job executing it. As I shared, I really enjoyed reading it, and it didn't feel like a textbook, but it also didn't feel like a novel. I felt like you guys had a great marriage of telling me a story while also giving me tactics, and the result of that was some areas that really stood out to me that I was telling you before, and I'd love to cover today. The first one by far that got me thinking was the importance of pretending like we're presenting to a child. What does that mean?
So to me, it's like whenever I think of presenting to a child, I think if I was explaining to my nephew or my little cousin what I do, it's not really sexy and like compelling if I tell them all this jargon that most likely would alienate them. I think in the way, how can I most simplistically explain to someone what I do? For example, if I come in and I say like, I create amazing presentations, usually they would think like, what does that mean? Especially to like a 4-year-old or like to my little cousin. So I usually explain to them, you see those things that you present on screens? I help make those. I help make them very, very fun, compelling, and I tell stories. And something in a simple way like that, you have to tailor your pitch. But then it goes like, oh, so Cousin Kenny, you're the one that goes out there and helps people tell stories on screen, on TV. They get it like that. It's like, that's literally what I tell them, and they understand in essence what I do. I'm basically a guy that just loves with a company that has like visual storytellers.
And I think that's the difference yet, and it happens to all of us, where we go to jargon, because jargon makes us feel powerful and smart. If instead of using that description, I make a comment like, we extract the most compelling components of leading brand stories to present them in a way that's digestible. I lost you when I said the first 2 words. For someone listening in who's kind of thinking, I think I have a lot of jargon in my pitch, why should they take it out?
So jargon is actually one of the ways that you can alienate someone because simply they're trying to keep up with you. It's almost in a way, it feels almost condescending if someone's using a lot of jargon around me because it shows that they're trying to be very smart. It shows that you don't know the audience, for one thing, is that you should never assume that I know what it is. That's why I say simplicity really is the ultimate sophistication. An example I frequently use is, do you remember during Steve Jobs' iPod speech? Like he said, this Apple iPod has like, 1 gigabyte, which is incredible for its time. And not many people in the marketing world like really cared about that because it's like, what does that mean to me? Then he followed up and said, that can hold 1,000 songs. And people are like, oh my God. That's the simplicity I'm talking about, is that when you put context to a statistic, it makes it so much more understandable. And I find like when you're explaining to someone that like, I'm 4 or I'm in 4th grade, if you give a big statistic and you find a way to make it relatable to something they care about, like let's say in the context of songs, that person's now your customer and they care way more rather than like, I want to buy a machine that's 1 gigabyte. What can that do for me? So context and avoiding jargon are the ways I would say you can explain to someone that's very young or someone that might not be in your industry, but you would like them to learn more about it.
And I think that's so important. There's a great example in a past first round review article where they cite a difference in a case study that Chegg did. They had on their site, we've saved hundreds of millions of dollars, not a lot of conversion. They changed it to say, we're going to save you $100.
Wow.
Immediately, people are interested because I don't care that you saved them all that money. I want to
Yeah.
save money.
I want to save $100.
Does the same come alive in presentations?
Yes, it does. So for me, I always think you are simply the facilitator, but the audience really has the power. Make it about them. Make it fun, make it enjoyable. When I think to myself, like, I see a presentation that's all about, like, these are the cool things I do up on screen, I think, what's in it for me? And so it's like the Simon Sinek golden circle, like the why, the what, and the how. It's really like if you frame your presentation in that kind of format and your mentality, you're more likely to create content that involves the audience rather than just telling the audience. There's a big difference there.
I'm glad you shared it in that way because, like I was saying, we talked to a lot of founders on the show, and one of the things you've had to do it too. Everyone has to pitch their business. Why
Hmm.
us? Why is what we're doing better than the next competitor?
Hmm.
When you're pitching, it really is all about you because you're
Yeah.
trying to demonstrate what you do. How do you make it about your audience?
I find so in any pitch, I think to myself, who am I pitching to and what is it valuable to them? Because of course you have to pitch what you do, but how does it apply to them? So like why? Why did I start this company? What's the story behind this? So if I'm going to pitch you Big Fish right now, I would say this is story Big Fish. We saw a really boring presentation and blah 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 blah. We thought we could change the world, rid the world of boring presentations. What we do: presentation design, delivery, video production, and then I would then in the how part of my pitch, how does it benefit you? So I say, how I do it is I can turn your presentation into an experience. And so all the things I take you along with my journey so far, you know my mission, you know what I do. But how I apply that for you is I can get you on stage, Jenna, and I can make you feel like what you're delivering right now is an experience of a lifetime. That's how we feel like we always made successfully our customers like really happy, is that we can have this huge narrative, but we can then find it and compress it in a way that can tug on the heartstrings of people. And that's like when you explain what your service does, explain how does it benefit to them. Because at the end of the day, you need the investment, you need the payment, like if you don't have it yourself, you better know the way that has the benefit to them. Especially when it comes to the nonprofit world. When you're trying to ask for funding or like when you're trying to like ask for just raising like profit or like raising money for like a cause, like I've learned this because I've actually had to raise money as sponsorships. It's like it's all about the how. Like how does it benefit them? That's so key in any pitch. It's like at the end of the day, if you walk away not explaining how you can make their lives better with what you do, you're going to be you're going to be forgotten.
And I think that comes alive here. You think you guys have it on 36. Yeah, I marked it here. So you have the story arc, which is always
Oh.
really helpful so
Hmm.
everyone can see what the book looks like. But there's the part that you were just talking about here. So you have the rising action of, these are all of the obstacles that we
Hmm.
need to overcome. Then you have the climax. I'm going to reveal my solution. How long are you talking about your solution in the case of what it does versus what it does for me?
So in my solution, I'm more focused on what it does for you if I'm tailoring the story to you. Because at the end of the day, what my solution is, it's a general relief. But at the end of the day, you don't care about that. You care about
Mm-hmm.
your problem, not what I do. It's at the end of the day, how can I solve your problem? And that's the way. It's a very big, tricky way to think about it. But ultimately, in the most simplistic form, if you spend all your time explaining what you do, you're leaving your customer or who you're pitching to making assumptions how you can help them. Why don't you tell them how you can help them? That's a big switch, and it also makes it a lot more personal.
I think that's huge. Can you give us a couple of examples to bring that to life for people?
Yes, for sure. So example right now, let's say this, I am about to sell you a car and I'm showing you all these really cool things, all the features and all that. If I'm not asking you the questions or I'm not engaging like with what you want, I'm wasting your time, Jenna. I'm wasting my time, wasting your time. It's really about as a presenter, learning how to ask and react to the audience and think about ahead of time, what do these people want to hear the most? I mean, why are they here? Like if you're going to a keynote, why are they paying a ticket to hear me? Like, they're not here for me to brag about myself and what I've done. They are here to learn something and to be led somewhere. But not only importantly, if I were to give you another example, is that if I was selling you a computer and I'm telling you all the features of the computers, you don't care about the features, you care about the benefits. How does it benefit your life? So there's a big switch in there is that I can give you a little bit like, oh, this is what it does here, but this is what it does, and this is how it results for you. And so it's always like, here it is for you. And so it's when you clarify that to someone, it's more valuable. It's like this, Jenna, you want to go see a movie tonight? What's the movie? Well, you know what? It's a movie about dinosaurs. And you're like, I don't really like dinosaurs, but I would say like, well, in the movie, it's like there's Brad Pitt. You're like, oh, I love Brad Pitt. So I'm like starting to like find ways to like make you care more and more and more. And that's what good presenters do. Is like they know their audiences and they're able to find what tugs at their audiences to make them really care. And that's why I would say for anybody, when you go in and give a presentation, researching your audience beforehand, asking the event organizer, what's the best presenter you've ever seen? What's the best presentation you've ever seen? What's the worst? Asking those kind of questions really makes a big difference in how, at the end of the day, your presentation will go and how it'll be received.
I'm glad that you mentioned knowing your audience because that's huge. And one of the things that you and I were discussing before we started recording was humor because it's a
Hmm.
very hard tightrope to walk
Yeah.
across.
Yeah, no kidding. Very
How
thin.
do you approach that?
So my rule of thumb for humor is that I like self-deprecating humor because that's more the easier ones in terms of like you can learn to laugh at yourself. It makes you more human. However, though, it's very important, like I said, to research your audience. For example, if you found out that the audience might not know a reference to a joke you're making due to an age demographic, do not make that joke because that can be completely lost, especially you open with it. So you don't want to lose your audience within 7 seconds that you open. Another example is that if you tell a joke and it completely falls flat, how do you recover from that? You know, it's like the only way that you recover from that is either you ask your audience or you use self-deprecating humor to get yourself your hole, get yourself out of the hole. But there's really no way, honestly, to go back 7 seconds and say, "Man, I really shouldn't have told that." So if anybody wants to tell a joke out there, I would say ask your audience, get to meet your audience beforehand, get them to know your personality, learn who you are, and get them to know your brand. If you're witty, it's okay to laugh at your jokes and they know you're a jokester, then by all means. But if they don't, be very careful. Like you have to have some kind of like relation or like knowledge and connection with them because at the end of the day, if your audience isn't behind you, it's going to be a very awkward time, no matter what joke you tell.
I think certainly it's important to know that there's times when humor is appropriate and there's times when
Yeah.
it's just not.
Yeah, it's like if I tell a joke when a very serious part of my presentation, when I'm asking for money, for example, when I'm asking for a big ask, I make light of it, that's not as funny as it should be. However, though, if I say like I tell a joke about myself where you get to know me a little bit better, that's a little bit more because it's more personal. So there's a timing for jokes for sure. Just like in any time joke, there should be pauses when you deliver a joke, but like there should also be a perfect time in your story or pitch when you should deliver that joke. It's all about timing.
And a lot of timing, what you just mentioned, was pausing. And
Yeah.
this can be difficult sometimes because you get up and you're going to give a presentation, you're really nervous. So you just start delivering everything right away. Let's talk about the power of the pause. First, what is it?
So to me, the power of the pause is being able to articulate your points very clearly without having to go too fast. For example, when you can tell when a person's very nervous is when they're speaking really fast and you don't know how you're going to keep up with them. Stuff like that. However, though, you can listen to someone and can actually articulate what they say. And my trick here too is like after you say a definitive sentence, like a really big main point, and you pause and you let it sink in, that's much more powerful. Pausing is used to build emphasis. Your presentation shouldn't sound monotone with a bunch of pauses, but if you wait for the right pause when you reveal something or you tell something big, that can have the most impact of your whole entire presentation.
More than
That's
what you
when it hits
say.
home. Exactly, exactly. It's really the feeling that you get, that timing, that moment. It's really for the audience. So if I see a speaker with you, Jenna, and they give a really powerful message, and when they deliver the main idea, their big idea of the whole entire presentation, and they pause, it's really you and I are sitting in the audience just thinking, how does that reflect to me? Wow. And sinks in. And then you keep going. But yeah, pausing is very crucial because it's really what sets the moment for the presentation. That's the wow moment.
And because it's the wow moment, do you have in your prep materials when you're going to pause?
I normally choose to pause when I reveal a main point. For example, in the book, we talk about structure. And so when I reveal structure, I say like rule of three, like find a way to put your points into one, two, and three. So if I reveal each point, that's very important for the audience to remember. For example, my frequent keynote that I do is the three things in any major presentation that you should master is one, content, two, design, three, delivery. Content, design, delivery. That's pretty easy to remember. But I say like you should remember content, design, delivery. See, that's very, is that supposed to be an important line I should remember for later? But you're pausing, it actually makes you think as an audience member, I need to remember that for later. That's going to be a big part of this presentation.
So that's almost as if I'm reading a blog, that's the blog quote
Correct.
that's
That's the
in
blog
bold.
quote or like the mini sub points in there, such as 7 tips to engage in the audience. Tip one is this. It's almost as you're reading it, that's the headline right there. It's very, very, very important to remember that when you if you learn how to pause correctly, and you can do so by like watching yourself rehearse, it can make a much more powerful emotional connection.
And when it comes to actually pausing, so I make my statement and I pause. How long am I pausing for?
I always say like to almost where it feels uncomfortable. And so I've done it anywhere from like 2.5 seconds like to even like 5 seconds, stuff like that, you know. It's like when you think you can hang on my words properly, that's when I think the longest of the pause is. But I like to normally say like 2.5 to 5 seconds. Make it almost feel uncomfortable when you give a really big point. The more bigger the point, the longer the pause.
I love that. And something you mentioned before also was pausing at the beginning of your presentation. Why is
Yes.
that important?
So when you pause at the beginning of your presentation, you're actually calibrating your audience's attention to you. I find that whenever you pause in front of a presentation, people are wondering, what's he going to say? And it's almost building these 6 seconds of suspense. So if you're on there for 7 seconds and you're not saying anything, people are looking at you, you're building that suspense up that makes people go, wonder what he's going to say next or what's about to happen. And you want that to happen too, because most important part of a presentation I find is that when I don't know where it's going, I know where the structure is, like what point he's on, but I like to know there's a lot of surprises along the way. Like it's like almost like a Disney movie where there's constant delight. Every time there's like a different emotion. But I love those kind of presentations that just bring you across through different emotions. And I feel like pausing really does that. It's because I'm able to compress and think about how I should feel about this.
And a big part of that, when you think of the big points, is tone. And that's your favorite thing to
hmm
train people on. Can we talk about tone for a couple of minutes?
Yeah, for sure. So tone to me, Jenna, is like how you say it. It's not what you say, but how you say it. And tone is so important because it really is the thing that prevents you from being monotone. Monotone tone. Tone, however, is very important when it comes to pausing and pace. If you're pausing and you're like screaming, it's awkward, right? It's really cringy. And so whenever I tell someone like practice their tone, I would think, what is the emotion that you want to show here? If your tone is happy, you want the audience to be happy, but does the content match to that? So if I'm telling you the sad story of like, let's say Hurricane Katrina, but I'm very uppity, it shouldn't be like that. It's a dire moment in human history, worst natural disaster. And I think actually worse national in United States history. But like to me, it's always been like if I'm telling a sad story like that, that's when my tone is very somber. When I realize that it's a very big moment in history. But if I'm excited about something, I'm revealing a product. That's when my tone is like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited to be here. I'm smiling. My body language is showing me that I'm very engaging. It's a big difference. So tone, body language really go well together, and also pausing because it's not just what you say; it's like how you say it with your body and your voice.
So, two things about excitement, because whether it's I mean, think anytime you're giving a presentation, often you're excited about what you're delivering. There's a reason you're there. You've spent a lot of time preparing. So you get up there and you're ready. And I do this all the time. When it comes to body, maybe I should put my hands down, talking about body language.
No, there you go. Like there you go. That's
But
good.
what's too much? Because when does the excitement get too much and
Let's
you're telling them what you're doing and it's just overwhelming?
So one of my friends, Dima Gowie, who actually gave a testimony on the book, she has a good point. Is that every big point she would use her hands like this, but when she's not using them, she'll like rest her hands like this and clasp them down there. And I find that as like a really good way to control yourself because there's certain times like it's appropriate, but when it's overwhelming energy, it becomes more distracting. And so I find like when to use like good hand language. Like right now, I'm not using hand language, but you notice other parts of the interview, I'm excited, I'm talking about it, I'm engaging. The more you do this, the more it becomes distracting when it's over and over and over again. Find the right times when to use your hands, because if you're able to do that, the audience will pay more attention and can tell like by your body language that you're excited. You don't want to be excited the whole entire time because it's a constant energy flow. You don't want something like this. You want something like this
And that's the
because
arc, right?
yeah, and that's the arc. You want something that's very, very like controlled energy. You don't want outward screaming energy, because when you go and you have a certain type of energy, but then all of a sudden you accelerate up, people will notice. But you're always excited. They never know when they should really listen.
I love it. And before we go, Kenny, I'd love to actually focus on that just a little bit deeper in a fun way.
Mm-hmm.
When I say tone, who do you think of as being a great example?
When I think of tone, Steve Jobs.
Steve
I feel like
Jobs.
that's yeah. I feel like that's a very easy example though. But Martin Luther King is another person that I see that's very good at that, because when he speaks, he knows when to. Well, he's a master of like pauses too. He's very good at pausing. If you watch some of his speeches, like I Have a Dream in that speech, you notice he pauses a lot and like he lets it really sink in, and his tone like it fluctuates because there's certain parts where he like inflects a lot more to make it sure it hits home more. So he combines his tone, his energy, and his pauses for certain parts. It's much more captivating and dynamic. And that's what the good orators do, Jenna, is like if they're able to combine and control their energy levels like that, they know how to manipulate their energy levels. That's when you can be a very captivating presenter. You're not all around the place. You are truly a focused individual.
Methodical.
Exactly. It's methodical. It's strategic.
All right, question number 2. When I say fantastic body language, you think of which presenter?
Oh, which presenter? I really like Benjamin Zander from he gave a TED talk on the power of classical music. He's so funny. I think he has great body language as he's telling stories. He's very engaging. Like you got to watch that presentation. Like his whole entire presentation involves music, and he would move with the music and everything. I think of that as a very good example of body like mastering body language.
Perfect. Last one for you, and this is one I'm most excited about. We're going to the story arc. When I say rising action, what presentation does it bring you back to?
Oh man, the iPhone for sure. When Steve Jobs was telling about like we got a computer, we have a phone, we have an MP3 player, and he's building all this suspense, Jenna. And then he goes and he like at the climax of it, he goes, "Oh yeah, by the way, these 3 devices that we're talking about, they're all one device, and it's the iPhone." The crowd went wild. Like it's incredible. Like that's what I think of when I think of rising action is building that suspense up, making people want to hear the next word. Like when you get to be able to like present and you're having people like beg, what's the next part of the story? That's when you got them really hooked.
Perfect. Well, I think you certainly all got us hooked with all of these answers today and wanting to learn more about the book. For everyone tuning in, Kenny, what's the best way to learn more about Big Fish and then also learn more about the book and hopefully get it?
So the best way to learn a little bit more about Big Fish is going to www.bigfishpresentations.com. But if you want free chapters of the book to make sure it's your cup of tea, you can actually go to thebigfishexperience.co. And we have actually 4 or 5 sample chapters on there, such as what's the big idea, what makes a good slide. I believe there's even one on body language there, for getting rid of verbal disfluencies actually. Those are all some of my favorite chapters of the book that anyone can pick up and read and learn immediately. But hopefully you get a copy of the book and you learn a lot more.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Jenna. It's a pleasure.